Welcome to the Reaper 1 to 100 Leveling Skills Guide. I'll be going over all of your skills as you train to be perfect cell, better than the rest of them, but also hopefully kill your enemies along the way. Watch as you go from this to this. This is a beginner-focused series aimed to help those new to Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO genre, or still just need a little help. In that same vein, this will be focused on your actions and how to use them. We'll not be going deep into optimization, instead focused on the general play and giving general opening rotations. We will go through these together in order to help new players understand the process. If you wish to push your play further, there are further places you could research the job. The goal here is to drop players in on the ground level so they can make strides to improve themselves. Tooltips are broken up by expansion and that expansion's level cap. So level 70 for Stormblood and our starting level, 80 for Shadowbringers, 90 for Endwalker, and our final level cap of 100 in Dawntrail. I recommend all players add Sprint and Limit Break to their hotbars, both found in the general tab of the Actions menu. And as for how my hotbars build, it'll make sense at 100. Just put your skills on your hotbar so that you are comfortable as you play. Everyone has their own way of doing things. If you want more info on the how and why I set up my UI, check the description for a video about it. Finally, keep in mind that this is an active MMO. Patches can and will change jobs. Check the description for a quick overview of each patch's changes or special notes. With all that out of the way, please support me in whatever way you can, check my links below, and let's begin. Reaper is a DPS job all about big hits and bursts of speed. If Dragoon is a train, Reaper is a bullet train. Your base rotation is simple and easy, but comes with multiple layers of complexity. Skills leading into other skills, multiple skills turning into other skills. Your main skill in Enshroud being much faster. If you have experience with Dragoon, Reaper lends itself well to your learning. The two jobs are nothing alike, but do have enough similarities for it to be helpful. Otherwise, Reaper offers a unique blend of slowness, speed, and power, with satisfying sound effects while remaining simple. To obtain the Reaper job, you must own the Endwalker expansion. You must complete your level 10 class quest, something you should have done long ago anyway. Be level 70, and head to the quest giver in Ul'dah outside of the Adventurers Guild. Before worrying about the Reaper toolkit, a reminder that you have melee role actions. If you want detailed descriptions of these actions, head to the description or the card in the corner for a video about them. I will otherwise not describe their use here. Now let's move into the finer details of each skill. Reaper starts at level 70, so you have a lot of buttons already, while still missing a major part of your toolkit. Level 50, Soul Gauge. You start off with a little gauge, the Soul Gauge. This fills as you attack or get special benefits from another ability. We'll go over that when we come to it. Otherwise, just know to watch this gauge for later. Level 60, Melee Mastery. Potency boosts. That's all this is. You may not even remember this exists when you level sync. Level 1, Slice. Level 5, Waxing Slice. And level 30, Infernal Slice. This is a combo to be used in order, with a broken line border showing the next button in line. They do 300 potency, 380 potency, and 460 potency of damage respectively. Each hit gives you 10 soul gauge, which we'll talk about how we spend later. This is the main series of skills you revert to when you have no important skills to be using and to generate soul gauge. Level 10, Shadow of Death. This is a 300 potency attack to a target that puts a 30-second debuff called Death's Design on the enemy. This increases all damage you do to it by 10%. Further, you can use this attack a second time on the enemy to extend the timer up to a maximum of 60 seconds. Finally, if the enemy dies while this buff is active, you will gain 10 soul gauge. You should absolutely keep this buff up on the enemy at all times. 10% damage up on top of already high potency attacks is a big increase for you. While you are learning, absolutely take every opportunity to make sure you have more than 30 seconds on the timer. That gives you more leeway to focus on all the other buttons you have available later on. Further, this skill does not break combos. If you use Slice and then use Shadow of Death, your combo into Waxing Slice will be maintained. If your buff is about to fall off, or if you want to extend the timer, you can Shadow of Death at any point in your main combo. Again, be sure to keep this debuff running. Level 60, Soul Slice. On a 30-second cooldown, this does a 460 potency hit to a target and gives you 50 soul gauge. Keep in mind, each hit of your main combo only gives you 10. This attack does as much damage as Infernal Slice while also giving 50 gauge. This is extremely important to keep on cooldown at all times. It will be worth even more damage when we talk about your gauge spenders. This also does not break your main combo, just like Shadow of Death. Level 50, Bloodstalk, and level 70, Enhanced Avatar. This is where things start to potentially get confusing. Bloodstalk is an OGCD ability, which means you can weave it between your global weapon skills. It costs 50 soul gauge to use, does 340 potency to a single target, and grants you a stack of Soul Reaver. Enhanced Avatar is what specifically allows Bloodstalk to give Soul Reaver. Using any attack will remove this buff from you. When you use Bloodstalk, you must immediately spend the Soul Reaver buff on the intended skills like they are a combo. You also have a 30-second timer, but this almost never comes into play. Level 70, Gibbet, Gallows, Unveiled Gibbet, and Unveiled Gallows. These first two attacks are the attacks you spend Soul Reaver on. These are essentially combos off of Bloodstalk. They both have the same overall effects, but some slight differences. Both do 400 potency and 460 potency when executing their positional. Gibbet has a flank, or side positional, pictured on screen with the red section of ground. Gallows has a rear positional, also pictured on screen. Using either of these skills has an additional effect, where it enhances the other. Using Gibbet will grant you Enhanced Gallows, which makes Gallows do more damage when using it next. Using Gallows will grant Enhanced Gibbet, making Gibbet do more damage. What this means is, every time you use Bloodstalk, you will want to alternate Gibbet and Gallows. You can tell because of the combo highlight over the opposite skill. Now, of course you can't just keep doing it, since Bloodstalk has a gauge cost, but you have 60 seconds with this enhanced buff, so you have plenty of time to alternate each as needed. On top of this, Gibbet and Gallows loop back to Bloodstalk, buffing it. Unveiled Gibbet and Unveiled Gallows are just upgrades to Bloodstalk. Watch Bloodstalk here when I use Gibbet and Gallows. It changes with you having Enhanced Gibbet or Enhanced Gallows from using those respective skills. Where Bloodstalk does 340 potency of damage, these Unveiled attacks do 400 potency. This further emphasizes your want to be spending gauge when you can. From this point on though, I will continue to call it Bloodstalk since it is the same button. Finally, let me ultimately mention, this does not break your main combo either. Really, the only thing you could do that will break your main combo is the main combo out of order, or using your AoE, Area of Effect combo. Let's quickly review. Shadow of Death to put your buff up and keep it up. Your 3-hit combo to build gauge. Soul Slice to give you a lot of gauge at once, and you want to keep it on cooldown. Bloodstalk to spend the gauge, and then Gibbet and Gallows immediately after Bloodstalk to use the given Soul Reaver buff. Alternate Gibbet and Gallows as you use more Bloodstalks. Seemed like a lot more, but broken down it's not as bad as it could have been. Now let's talk about our AoE versions of these abilities. You tend to want to use AoE on 3 or more enemies as a Reaper. Level 25, Spinning Scythe, and level 45, Nightmare Scythe. This is our AoE main combo. Spinning Scythe is 140 potency to all enemies within 5 yalms of you, with Nightmare doing 180 to all enemies within the same range. Each hit also gives you 10 soul gauge. Further, using your special attacks will once again not break this combo. Only a single target combo will break it. Use these attacks to earn gauge when you have nothing else to use. Level 35, Whorl of Death. This does a 5-yalm AoE around yourself that hits all enemies in range with a 100 potency attack, also putting Death's design on everything. Remember, this is what ups our damage. When dealing with groups, this is your AoE version of putting up your buff on enemies. When running along with the tank, try and use this to get the buff on. When it is, start using your other AoEs to start building soul gauge. This buff is especially important for AoE because if there are 5 enemies in the group, Whorl of Death will be worth 50 soul gauge when the enemies die with Death's design on. Even more enemies leads to you gaining massive amounts of soul gauge. This makes Reaper an absolute powerhouse in dungeon trash pools. Imagine getting 80 gauge instantly just because the enemies all died. This is why Whorl of Death is extremely important here. Level 65, Soul Scythe. This has a 5-yalm radius around you, does 180 potency to all enemies, and gives you 50 soul gauge. However, this shares that 30-second cooldown with Soul Slice. If you use either skill, both of these will go on cooldown. This is just your AoE version of Soul Slice. Make sure to keep it on cooldown so you can keep getting gauge. Wait for the tank to group everything up, then fire away. Level 55, Grim Swathe. This is our AoE version of Bloodstalk, which means you get Soul Reaver and must immediately use that buff afterwards. It costs 50 gauge, can be used between weapon skills, and does 140 potency to all enemies in an 8-yalm cone in front of you. This is a very large cone, as you can see, essentially being completely in front of you. This has some level of awkwardness involved, since you will have to step out of the group of enemies to maximize the number of enemies hit by Grim Swathe and our next skill. Level 70, Guillotine. This is your AoE version of Gibbet and Gallows, which means this is what you will use Soul Reaver on after using Grim Swathe. This is another 8-yalm cone, and does 200 potency to all enemies within the cone. Spend your gauge on Grim Swathe in AoE, then immediately use Guillotine. As a side note, if for some reason there are, say, 3 enemies, and 1 enemy dies leaving only 2, you can use Grim Swathe into Gibbet or Gallows. You aren't locked within AoE if you use Grim Swathe. Conversely, if you use Bloodstock, you can use Guillotine. This flexibility may find some use in niche situations. That covers your main attacking toolkit. We have a few more buttons to go over, but these fall into the utility category. Utility is just as important to use though. Level 15, Harpe. Does a 300 potency ranged attack with a 25 yalm range. It will give us 10 soul gauge on hit. However, this has a 1.3 second cast time. As a result, you need to quickly get into place if you wish to use your ranged attack. While ranged attack do not break combos, you should avoid using them as much as possible. Try and stay within range of enemies as much as you can. There will be times you cannot be within melee range, but they're not that common with proper play. More often than not, you can keep pace with your melee attacks. Level 20, Hell's Ingress and Hell's Egress. These two skills share a 20-second cooldown and work in tandem later on. Hell's Ingress is a 15 yalm leap forward, while Hell's Egress is a 15 yalm jump backwards. Using either one will put them both on cooldown. This is an extremely useful pair of skills for moving around. You can avoid AoEs or quickly move into range of a boss, no problem. This also helps a ton for trash pulls, especially when running wall to wall. Sprint should be all you need, but you can keep up and even get ahead better with Hell's Ingress. At the very least, you can use Shadow of Death on enemies just a little bit easier. A further effect is a combo with Harpe. For 10 seconds, you have 1 instant cast use of Harpe. This is not going to be used often, but for any situation where you absolutely must remain out of range of the boss, not having a cast time for a single use of Harpe further increases mobility. You can escape from harm even more safely, while still attacking. Using Enhanced Harpe will also reduce the cooldown of Ingress and Egress by 5 seconds, allowing you to use it again just that much sooner. Remember though, don't focus so much on using Harpe. Try and maintain use of your melee skills as much as you can. Level 40, Arcane Crest. On a 30-second cooldown, this grants you a shield for a short 5 seconds, with 10% of your max HP. This is kind of rough to use in solo content that isn't solo duties. 10% isn't a lot of HP, but 5 seconds is very short. Put it up as much as you can. In party content, absolutely make sure to use this anytime a raid-wide ability is about to go out, or damage you fail to dodge. This can save you, and gets a huge buff later on. That covers all of our basic skills we have the moment we unlock Reaper. It can be overwhelming without some level of direction, but hopefully this breakdown helped. The first job quest also does a pretty good job of explaining it and giving you practice on the job. Now let's talk our opener and rotation. It is actually extremely basic as of 70. Keep the death design buff up, keep Soul Slice on cooldown, spend your gauge for big hits, then rely on your basic combo until you must refresh the buff or use another soul skill. So simple, our opener is basically non-existent. We're going to set it up specifically to build to our level 100 opener, even if it is slightly less optimal. Pre-pull, Harpe, Shadow of Death, Soul Slice, Bloodstock, Gallows, Slice, Waxing Slice, Infernal Slice. I won't bother going any further than here because there isn't really anything else to do. As I said, you need to keep your buff up, keep your Soul Slice on cooldown, and spend gauge when you can to use Bloodstock. It's more about understanding how the different layers of the toolkit fit together, which is a skill-by-skill basis sort of understanding. The only things to talk about are the Harpe and very early Soul Slice usage. We are going to cast Harpe about 2 seconds before the tank pulls the boss, where possible. If the tank gives you a countdown, hit Harpe slightly after the 2 appears. However, even in the more difficult raids in casual content, tanks just instant pull. Because of the fact that it gives 10 soul gauge, for as far as practice, I would recommend just trying to time your Harpe with the tank and not skip it. If it offered just pure damage, I would say to just skip it in casual content. Gauge management is something Reaper wants to get used to for later levels. That 10 gauge can make the difference in more prolonged fights. We then obviously open with Shadow of Death. This leads into Soul Slice. By now you've probably seen party buffs from other players. This Soul Slice is going to be used far before those go out. This is something that will only make sense in later levels. If you want to be more optimal, delay Soul Slice until buffs are used. Otherwise, this is the muscle memory position. For our AoE, the idea of an AoE opener is really not what you think it is. With how tanks tend to wall-to-wall pull as they gain confidence and skill, it's not a simple thing to deal with. You have the entire run-up to deal with first, and then only want to unload your full toolkit once the tank stops running. During the running part, we're going to spam Whorl of Death to both get chip damage and try to apply Death Design to as many enemies as we can. Ideally, most enemies get up to 60 seconds on the timer. Once we reach the final set of enemies and the tank stops running, we'll Whorl of Death one last time to put it on those newly engaged enemies and wait for the trailing enemies to catch up. From there, simply aim to hit as many enemies as possible with Soul Scythe once they're all bunched up. Remember to back out of the middle of the pack to use Grim Swathe and Guillotine, as those are cones. From there, all we can do is spam our basic combo until we have 50 gauge again. If some enemies die early, they will give us a burst of gauge to help finish off the rest. Then you'll get some more as those die for the next fight. That's all there is to Reaper to start. It's a lot of buttons at once, but it's nowhere close to the full depth of the job. Going into the Shadowbringers levels is going to massively speed up how much Reaper has to do. Level 72, Arcane Circle. On a 2-minute cooldown with a 30 yalm range, this gives all allies affected a 3% damage boost for 20 seconds. This is extremely important to get this out to your party. 3% is small on its own, but it ideally is affecting the entire party, making it much more powerful. This is especially true during openers. Buffs multiply, so pairing it with everyone else makes it even stronger. In trash pools, wait for your tank to group up the enemies before popping this, like we saw in our AoE opener. This will help melt the trash mobs that much faster. The importance of Arcane Circle will also increase later. Level 74, Hellsgate and Regress. Hellsgate is a trait that buffs Hell's Ingress and Hell's Egress. Whenever you use either of these skills, you leave behind a portal from your starting position and turn the opposite skill into Regress. So if you use Hell's Ingress, Hell's Egress will become Regress. Regress lasts for 10 seconds and has twice the range as the initial jump. So while the skills move you 15 yalms forward and backward, you can use Regress from within 30 yalms of the portal, which, upon pressing Regress, will teleport you back to the portal from anywhere within range. This is massive for movement. You can teleport out of range right before an enemy launches an attack, then teleport right back in. If it's a lengthy wait to get back in, you can say, use Hell's Egress, use that instant cast Harpe you were given, then teleport right back in with Regress. Just make sure it's a situation that requires this. As I've already mentioned, being away from enemies is not ideal. All your big, strong attacks require you to almost exclusively be near the boss, at least max melee range. But proper mastery of these two skills can turn an entire boss arena into your playground. Level 76, Gluttony. On a 60-second cooldown and costing 50 soul gauge, this ability has a range of 25 yalms. You can throw it out from a distance if need be. It causes a 5 yalm AoE around the initial target, dealing 520 potency to that first target, and 390 potency to all additional enemies hit. Most importantly, Gluttony gives you 2 stacks of Soul Reaver. This means in single target fights when using this skill, you can do Gibbet immediately into Gallows. Just like before, you cannot use any other attacks or you lose these Soul Reaver stacks immediately. For AoE, this will be 2 uses of Guillotine on top of being a very strong hit of its own. Be wary of this being a 3rd AoE type on top of your player-centered circles and Conal AoEs. This is enemy-centered. Gluttony takes extreme priority over Bloodstalk or Grim Swathe. Both of these are far lower in power and only give 1 Soul Reaver. They also do not have a cooldown we want to get rolling. Where possible, which should be every other use the bonus gauge from Soul Slice and Soul Scythe immediately on Gluttony. Level 78, Tempered Soul. Simply put, you now have 2 stacks of Soul Slice and Soul Scythe, making these skills have multiple charges. The moment a charge is used, the cooldown starts rolling as normal. This retroactively makes Gluttony even better, because each charge only takes 30 seconds, you get 2 charges for every 60 seconds it takes to get Gluttony. This means you can always have a stack of Soul Slice or Soul Scythe in reserve when Gluttony will be coming off of cooldown. This also means you have even more gauge generation. Between trash pulls, you may get 1 or more charges back. In transitions in trials where you can't attack, that timer will be slowly ticking down. Try and find the balance of always having gauge for Gluttony and continually using the charges for more avatar attacks. Level 80, Shroud Gauge, Enshroud, Void Reaping, Cross Reaping, and Grim Reaping. That's a lot, so let's break it down. First off, if you wish to get this ability, you must complete your Reaper job quests. This will remain locked until you do so. First is the Shroud Gauge. You now have 2 gauges on your bar. You accumulate 10 Shroud anytime you use Gibbet, Gallows, or Guillotine. So spend Soul Gauge to gain a little bit of Shroud Gauge. Next we have Enshroud, which has a 15-second cooldown. This cooldown tends to not matter casually, but as you improve as a player, you will very much have to take note of that cooldown. It costs 50 Shroud Gauge to activate, and allows you to pull the dumbest idea you will ever have as a Warrior of Light, and offer your flesh as a vessel for your avatar. Which, may I remind you, is a void scent that wishes to possess your body permanently. With Enshroud, there is a second UI element. This is the Death Gauge, and 5 stacks of Lemure Shroud. Each stack allows you to pull off an attack, for 5 total in your time as a vessel. Void Reaping is an upgraded version of Gibbet, and Cross Reaping an upgraded version of Gallows. They do not retain their positionals, so you get full damage no matter what. Further, they have a 1.5 second recast, rather than the 2.5 second recast of any other GCD. This means you'll be hitting these buttons a lot faster. Just like normal, you want to be alternating Void and Cross. They still will enhance the other. It is 460 potency normally, and 520 when enhanced. Alternating back and forth ensures they remain at 520 potency. You can start with either one, as long as you alternate back and forth. Each use of either of these costs 1 Lemure Shroud. Use 5 attacks, and the Lemure Shroud will dissipate. Finally, we have Grim Reaping. This is our AoE use of Lemure Shroud. 200 potency to all enemies in an 8-yalm cone in front of you. Hit this 5 times and you will finish your Lemure AoE. Again, if for whatever reason you need to switch between single target and AoE Lemure attacks, just like the Avatar attacks, you can. Something to note is that Enshroud disables most of our toolkit aside from the Enshroud-based abilities. The exception is Shadow and Whorl of Death. You can still place Death's design on the enemies even in Enshroud. This is abused for optimal play. Our opener has not changed much, but is plenty more active. A second stack of Soul Slice greatly speeds up the pressure, and Gluttony is a big addition to our Avatar toolkit. The big thing that may draw your eye is how quickly we go into our Arcane Circle. While most jobs tend to use their party buff around the 3rd GCD, we're using ours on the 2nd. The main reason we will be doing this is for something that comes up at level 90. This is here for muscle memory, since the level 90 reason, on top of the level 100 reasons, are really important. From there, it is likely exactly how you might expect the opener to go. Use the 2nd Soul Slice for another Gibbet or Gallows, then we go back to just basic combos. Try and keep 50 Shroud Gauge around when you get back to a 2-minute window, so you can also Enshroud after you finish your Gluttony usage. Otherwise, you can mostly just Enshroud whenever you can. The same applies with AoE. We're going to lead with Arcane Circle to get the buff going before we burst the enemies. From there, it's just going to be spending our big hits, and maybe getting in an Enshroud later in the fight. Remember to spend Soul Gauge before enemies start dying, since they are worth a lot of gauge when they do. The ramp-up of Reaper truly begins with Endwalker levels. The crux of our opener is here, along with a few other awesome tools. Level 82, Soulsow, and Harvest Moon. Actually, it's called Story of Seasons. Outside of combat, Soulsow is an instant cast. Inside of combat, it has a 5-second cast time. Because of this, you do not want to cast Soulsow unless the enemy cannot be attacked. For example, if the boss is doing some form of ultimate attack they are untargetable for. That's called downtime. Upon being cast, you will be granted the buff of Soulsow, which turns Soulsow the skill into Harvest Moon. Using Harvest Moon spends the Soulsow buff and immediately reverts the button. The action itself is a 5-yalm AoE around the target, hitting all enemies in range. You can do this attack from 25 yalms away. Its power is 600 potency to the first target and 360 to any additional enemies. It will also increase your soul gauge by 10. In a lot of situations, you will only get to use this once per battle. The moment you start a duty, between packs of trash mobs in dungeons, and before bosses, you can use Soulsow to prepare for when the tank has grouped all the enemies together. It's an extremely powerful AoE move. Bosses, this is mainly for disengagement, a better version of Harpe. Also be sure to use Harvest Moon before any point in a fight where the boss leaves. If you never use it, you can't get an additional free one. It's a skill that gets better with working around specific fight design. Use this under buffs to replace a weaker skill if you can, when the boss summons a bunch of added enemies, or when you absolutely cannot stay near the boss. Which also, if you need to ingress or regress away from the boss, use Harvest Moon instead of that instant cast Harpe. Level 84, Enhanced Arcane Crest. This trait is extremely good despite what it seems. This is why I told you to practice using Arcane Crest. Anytime your shield breaks, it explodes into Crest of Time Returned. You and all allies within 15 yalms are given 15 seconds of a 50 potency regen. This is a hot, or healing over time. Hots and dots work on a 3-second server tick, so that's 5 possible ticks for a total 250 potency heal. In any dungeon fight with low amounts of party-wide damage, this can single-handedly heal. Higher damaging fights, this helps top everyone off sooner and easier. Anytime you are going to take unavoidable damage, raid-wide, targeted, or stack marker, use this skill. Not only do you take less damage, now you're supporting the team. Level 84, Melee Mastery 2. Just some potency boosts to our base combo, nothing more. Level 86, Void Soul, Lemure's Slice, and Lemure's Scythe. Void Soul is a trait that slightly changes how the Shroud gauge works. Using any of your skills will spend a charge of Lemure Shroud and replace it with a charge of Void Shroud, from red dots to purple. However, upon using your 5th Lemure Shroud, you will automatically exit the avatar form even if you have Void Shroud charges. You spend these Void Shrouds on Lemure's Slice or Lemure's Scythe. Both of these cost 2 Void Shroud charges, so after 2 attacks, you get 1 Lemure attack. These are off globals, so you can weave them between your reaping skills. Let's take the AoE Lemure's Scythe for example. This does 100 potency to all enemies in an 8-yalm cone toward the target, costing 2 Void Shroud. So you would do 2 Grim Reapings, then Lemure's Scythe, 2 more Grim Reapings, into Lemure's Scythe, and then 1 final Grim Reaping. Then there's the single target version, Lemure's Slice. This works the same way, but does 200 potency to a single enemy. Use 2 Reapings, Lemure's Slice, 2 Reapings, Lemure's Slice, and your final Reaping. This further increases how active your Enshroud windows are, but they're strong enough to be important to use. Also note that if you're having trouble finding these skills, it's because you've had them on your bar since level 70. Bloodstalk and Grim Swathe become these 2 skills when you are enshrouded. Level 88, Enhanced Arcane Circle, and Plentiful Harvest. Arcane Circle is given an extra buff of sorts. All allies, including yourself, affected by Arcane Circle, have 5 seconds to successfully use a weapon skill or spell. Upon doing so, it will grant you 1 stack of Immortal Sacrifice. 1 per player, up to a maximum of 8 for the party size. So hope your allies are all using skills like they should be. When the 5 seconds are up, and all stacks have been calculated, you may spend them on Plentiful Harvest. Once the sacrifice buffs wear off, Plentiful Harvest becomes available. It does a minimum of 720 potency, up to a maximum of 1000 potency, based on the number of stacks of Immortal Sacrifice. Essentially, each party member's stack increases the power of Plentiful Harvest by 35 potency. This also is an AoE in a straight line that goes 15 yalms in the direction of your target, and it's a fairly wide line. The second enemy and further will take 40% less damage, so 432 potency to 600 potency per enemy, depending on stack count. So this is a very big hit you want to get out before Arcane Circle runs out. The rewards don't end there, as Plentiful Harvest gives Ideal Host on hit for 30 seconds. This creepy buff name means that your next Enshroud is completely free, instead spending the buff. Further, you'll still be under Arcane Circle, meaning your avatar form is further power boosted. Before, you'd never have enough Shroud gauge until at least the second Arcane Circle. Now, Arcane Circle supplies it for you. On top of trying to get Arcane Circle on every ally to buff their damage, you want to do so to buff yourself. Be sure to get it running when the fight begins and every time it comes off of cooldown in combat. Level 90, Communio. This is only usable when enshrouded and ends Enshroud on use. Communio does a massive 1100 potency to the target enemy, and 660 potency to all enemies within 5 yalms of the initial target. It also comes with a 1.3 second cast time, which means you can't be on the move for it. This is now the ultimate reason why you want to use Enshroud. Sure, the quick slice and dice is really strong, but this finisher is huge for both AoE and boss fights. It's a bit of a pace breaker compared to the general speed of everything else in the Enshroud phase, but otherwise it isn't too hard to get used to. Fitting this into our current Enshroud pattern, use this after your second use of Lemure's Slice or Scythe. Your final stack of Lemure's Shroud is for Communio. And again, Communio must be the last action you take if you want to get the full worth of your Enshroud. Communio ends the buff even at 5 stacks remaining. If, say, you accidentally enter Shroud phase before the boss becomes untargetable or will die soon, you can end your Shroud early with Communio while still getting the bulk of your damage. Try to avoid this though. Use Enshroud when you can get the full use of it. Endwalker gave us a lot to slot into our opener. 2 new buttons, but a whole guaranteed Enshroud and all the things that were just added to it. This is why we wanted to use Arcane Circle so early. By the time we finish with using our Soul Slices and Gluttony, Plentiful Harvest should become available. The second Soul Slice ends up being more for time wasting than the damage. Use Plentiful Harvest and go right into Enshroud for our main damage source. It does not matter whether you start with Void Reaping or Cross Reaping. Do whichever you are more comfortable with. You'll get 2 uses of each regardless. After the second and fourth skill, Lemure's Slice is available to be weaved. Be quick on the draw there due to the short GCD. Finish the Enshroud with Communio, remembering it has a cast time. Once Enshroud is done, we have 1 more GCD worth of Arcane Circle left. As far as our current toolkit goes, Harvest Moon is the best skill we have left, so we'll use it here, assuming you won't need it for downtime. Otherwise we'll do a normal slice. We'll weave in Bloodstalk, Unveiled Gibbet or Gallows based on what you did during Gluttony, and do the relevant next button. I tend to do Gallows first, so this too is a Gallows. We'll then use Shadow of Death here to extend the timer, before moving back into our base GCD combo. From here, we're going to try to always have 50 gauge going into our next Arcane Circle window. About 6 seconds before Arcane Circle comes off of cooldown, we'll go into Enshroud. This is advanced tech I won't go deeper into, but double Enshroud windows are extremely strong for Reaper. Otherwise, the main rotation is simple. Spend gauge as you get it, trying only to keep around 50 gauge when you're coming up on a 2-minute Arcane Circle window for double Enshroud windows. If you are not doing that, you're simply spending Shroud gauge as you get it too. As for AoE, we're not going to be doing things that fancy. Well, yes, we're going to be doing Arcane Circle and Plentiful Harvest into Enshroud, but no real attempts at double Enshroud windows. That'll mostly be an accidental occurrence, with us going into a trash pool with enough gauge and Arcane Circle coming off cooldown. Things are also slightly sped up still, just because of the pace of how trash is being handled. We won't need the second Soul Scythe until after Enshroud, and we are unlikely to need Whorl of Death depending on how the poll went. If it's going to fall off before stuff dies, put in an extra Whorl of Death. Remember that Plentiful Harvest is a line rather than a conal AoE. You'll need to attempt to find the best through line to hit as many enemies as possible. Depending on how the tank groups the enemies, this can be difficult. Just do your best to take advantage of the fact that this is a thick line rather than a thin one. Endwalker made this a far busier job while still staying on the simple side. While feeling complete, Dawntrail is going to give us a few more things to be the icing on top. Level 92, Enhanced Enshroud and Sacrificium. Using Enshroud now gives us Oblatio until we exit Enshroud. This can be either from the timer or from using all of our Lemure Shroud. Gluttony will become Sacrificium and is a free OGCD to weave in. We now have 3 skills to weave in during Enshroud, with priority to Sacrificium due to it being a 600 potency AoE to a target, doing 360 potency to all enemies within 5 yalms of the main target. Whatever order you use them in, just make sure you get all 3 weaves in, 1 per GCD. Level 94, Melee Mastery 3. This is just a lot of potency boosts. It does not change how we play at all. Level 96, Enhanced Gluttony, Execution is Gibbet, Execution is Gallows, and Execution is Guillotine. This is essentially also just a potency boost, but it comes with some awesome new animations. Gluttony no longer gives Soul Reaver, instead giving Executioner. This cannot be stacked with Soul Reaver, so don't try to use Bloodstock and Gluttony together now. Executioner upgraded our Soul Reaver skills into much stronger versions. Executioner's Gibbet and Gallows have a base 700 potency, and Executioner's Guillotine is 260 potency per enemy. Again, we don't use these any differently, they're just potency boosts when boiled down. They even keep the Enhanced Gibbet and Enhanced Gallows buffs and effects, along with the positionals. Level 100, Enhanced Plentiful Harvest and Perfectio. More than a potency boost, Plentiful Harvest now gives an additional buff in Perfectio Occulta for 30 seconds. This gives us 30 seconds to trigger the next part of the skill. It wants us to use Communio to turn Perfectio Occulta into Perfectio Parata for 30 seconds. So the Enshroud we get from Plentiful Harvest itself will achieve this goal. With Perfectio Parata, Communio will turn into Perfectio, our final skill. This is an even stronger Communio, doing 1300 potency to the target and 780 potency to all enemies within 5 yalms of it. It also does not have a cast time, meaning you can also use it as a ranged GCD. Simply just use this as soon as you get it. More optimizations can be done as you improve, but generally just making sure you use it is your main priority. That's the end of our Reaper toolkit. Pretty simple overall, but with a few technical points to watch out for. This means it's time to go over our final opener. Rather than a quick go-over of the Dawntrail editions, I'll be doing a full final overview to help it make sense in whole. We start with a pre-pull of Harpe. About 2 seconds before the pull, you want to cast Harpe for a free bit of damage. The cast time is being leveraged to our benefit. However, in casual content, this can be difficult to do, since tanks will instantly pull. It's good to do for practice for real situations at least. Muscle memory can go a long way. We're going to then start with Shadow of Death, since we want Death's design running at all times. That extra damage adds up very fast. We'll then Soul Slice to give us Soul Gauge to start off our burst. We'll weave in both Arcane Circle and Gluttony to buff up the rest of our damage. Gluttony gives us 2 Executioner's hits, which you can use in whichever order you prefer. Just make sure to always alternate Gibbet and Gallows through a whole duty. By the time you use your second GCD of these, all party buffs should be running. You'll then use your second Soul Slice more for the time wasting than anything, as we're still waiting for Plentiful Harvest, which comes next. This gives us the true start to our burst. We'll immediately Enshroud and do the full window. 2 of each reaping alternated, with our weaves in between. Weave in Sacrificium after the first attack so we don't miss it, since our Lemure Slice uses are taking up a lot of space. After the 4th reaping, end with Communio. That final GCD must always be Communio, or we will lose it, and the Perfectio right after. We'll use the weaving window from Perfectio to spend the soul gauge we got before Enshroud. This will be where Arcane Circle is ending, but the rest of the party buffs will be able to buff the Gibbet or Gallows we use. From there, it's about setting up for our filler phase. Shadow of Death to put our debuff timer back up before moving back into basic combo strings. Between bursts, use stuff on cooldown for the most part. Make sure to keep your soul gauge low enough so Soul Slice doesn't overcap you, and so you can Gluttony. Keep enough Shroud gauge for double Enshroud windows every 2 minutes. Otherwise, feel free to spend that as you get it too. Now we can go into the karaoke opener. This is where I'm going to say the names of the skills as they are used. This will give you a better idea of the pace of the opener through the whole thing. Just keep in mind that the skill names can be long and interrupt each other, especially during the Enshroud window where there's a lot happening at once. Pre-pull, Harpe. Shadow of Death. Soul Slice, Arcane Circle, Gluttony. Execution is Gallows. Execution is Gibbet. Soul Slice. Plentiful Harvest, Enshroud. Void Reaping, Sacrificium, Cross Reaping, Lemure Slice, Void Reaping. Cross Reaping, Lemure Slice, Communio. Perfectio, Bloodstock. Gallows. Shadow of Death. Slice. For our AoE opener, things go about the same. Make sure you use Sacrificium after your first Enshroud GCD and end your Enshroud with Perfectio. You'll still need to aim all your different AoE shapes differently, but it adds an interesting dynamic between just mashing AoE buttons. Keep an eye on the death's design timer, and only refresh when enemies will not die before it falls off. The extra soul gauge from enemies dying makes for a ton of extra Grim Swathe uses. Reaper is a very fun job to play with. The themes might be edgy, but that edge gets pointed at your enemies. There's a lot more you could do to optimize the job as you get better at it. Just remember that you reap what you sow. Thank you for watching this Reaper 1 to 100 leveling skills guide. Feel free to give feedback or ask questions on what might still be confusing to you. I am always seeking to improve, as should you. Don't stop with this guide, even if I succeeded in helping you improve. Please leave a rating, comment, sub, those really do help creators. You can also come watch me on Twitch, or even go follow my Patreon. The links in the description will take you where you need to. Have fun in your adventures across Tyrol, and may the power of Anne and Idhogs lay waste to your enemies.